Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Beyond the Wire podcast. I'm your host, Tim Keller. Along with me, as he always is my wonderful co-host, Mr. Matt Disher. And we have a fantastic returning guest to the podcast, Mr. Dave Simons. You may remember him from previous episodes. Dave is a former Marine, has spent time over in Afghanistan himself. It's great to have you on, Dave.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
His beard is a little bit longer since last time we saw him, and he has more weaponry behind him on the wall than the first time.
Well, I think the last time he was at work at his place of business, and
I was at the shop, and
you have a water machine there. Someone came to use the water, fill their water, right in the middle of the episode. He's not at the shop this time, so no one should be coming to get themselves water for this episode. But Dave is experiencing some fire alarm issues. There is not a fire. Dave did get up and check. There is not a fire in the home, but one of the hardwired detectors has a low battery. As Dave holds up to 9 volts there. One of the detectors has a low battery, so the system's going a little funky right now. So Dave is going to spend the next hour with us, shooting the breeze, and then he's going to start beating on fire alarms to try to figure out the issue. So.
But let's talk about the weaponry behind your head, Dave. So you've got a couple of things on the wall. Tell us about those rifles up top.
So both of these rifles were brought back from Afghanistan. So I was there.
Oh, they don't need those anymore because they have new equipment, right?
New stuff. How'd they get that new stuff?
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
These don't work as well as their new stuff now. So they were practically giving stuff away to us, which it's a one-for-one trade-off, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did they give you any old helicopters or tanks or anything?
Yeah. No, I did have a cannon that they didn't allow me to bring back.
Okay.
That's still over there somewhere. That would have been nice, but still on the bucket list.
Soviet, Cold War era helicopters sitting in his backyard.
Yeah. That's just for parties and fun times.
Yeah, parties and fun times. Before we get into our normal conversation and we go over some news, we wanted to take a few moments, and we're going to read off the names of the 13 members of the armed forces that were recently killed at the suicide bombing over in Afghanistan. And, while he is last on this list, I'm going to bring up the Navy doc, because the Navy corpsman, for any Marine, the Navy corpsman is your best friend. So Navy corpsman Maxton Sovak, he was 22 years old from Berlin Heights, Ohio. Rest in peace, sir. Lance Corporal Kareem Nakui, 20 years old, Norco, California. Lance Corporal Dylan Marola, 20 years old, Rancho Cucamonga, California. Lance Corporal Riley McCollum, 20 years old, Jackson, Wyoming. Lance Corporal Jared Schmitz, 20 years old, Charles, Missouri. Lance Corporal David Espinoza, 20 years old, Rio Bravo, Texas. Corporal Humberto Sanchez, 22 years old, Logansport, Indiana. Corporal Dagan Page, 23 years old, Omaha, Nebraska. Corporal Hunter Lopez, 22 years old, Indio, California. Staff Sergeant Darren Hoover, 31 years old, Salt Lake City. Sergeant Nicole Gee, 23 years old, Sacramento, California. And Sergeant Johnny Pichardo, 25 years old, Lawrence, Massachusetts. To those 13 individuals, their friends, their families, their loved ones, we have you in our thoughts and in our prayers. May all of these fine individuals rest in peace.
I think it's also important to note, my wife made this comment the other day, the oldest among them is 31 years old. The average age of these, and I didn't add these ages up, but it's 20, 21 years old. These are many of these service members that were killed in Afghanistan the other day We're unable to legally buy a beer here in the United States, for example. It's kind of a cross section, or it's a good example of who is serving. These are, and I'm old enough to say this, these are kids. And they were carrying out an impossible mission. And this is what I'll say to anybody who served in Afghanistan along the way. You carried out impossible missions. This has been a long conflict filled with a lot of strife, a lot of struggle. There's been a lot of people I've seen lately, those who have served in Afghanistan recently, who have come back and said, well, what did we do this all for? Obviously we couldn't be there forever. But I think at the end of the day, this is just another example of the young men and women who put on the uniform and serve selflessly and go get into harm's way. And in many cases, they are just a couple of years out of high school. Mm-hmm. In all cases, these are men and women who have families back home. Some of them have children. Some of them have children expecting. It's never easy. It's not ever easy. But it's just a reminder that all of this can be taken away in just a moment. And it's also a bit of a memorial, back to their families that we recognize them. I've looked at these faces, these pictures, every single day since this has happened, as I do whenever somebody's face comes up on the TV or something like that. But I've sought them out to see who they are and where they're from and what their stories are. So I recommend anybody else who wants to know more about these men and women do so. As I always say on social media, say their names so they are not forgotten.
Mm-hmm. And I want to take a second to say my deepest apologies. I forgot the member of the Army, Staff Sergeant Ryan Nouse, 23 of Croydon, Tennessee. My apologies to him and his family. Yeah, Matt, you're talking about 5 individuals on a list of 13 that were not even of age to legally purchase a beer. They could not legally walk into an establishment and sit down at the bar. Then we're talking about a bunch of 22, 23-year-olds. There was 125, and then that individual that, had just broken 30, 31 years old. Young Americans. Matt, you said it yourself. We are at an age now where we can say these are kids. These are people that had their entire lives ahead of them. Their service was, for most of them, probably a short window of time in their lifespan, or was going to be a short window of time in their lifespan. And they could have gone on to do countless things. Great human beings, probably, amongst this group.
Right. And
it's sad to see something like this happen. It's tragic. It's terrible. So like we said, rest in peace to all those individuals. As we normally do, we like to try to get into some news, kind of staying on this topic. And Matt, you mentioned it before we went live today. The VA is fielding a huge wave of calls from veterans on their suicide lines, their distress lines, people just looking for help or somebody to listen to. The article here on military.com, veterans devastated, just gutted over allies left behind after the U.S. withdrawal. So veterans and civilians who worked tirelessly to help Afghans escape Taliban rule are now agonizing over the fates of friends and allies left behind in the wake of the U.S. military's withdrawal, which was completed Monday. So that's another thing. We have to remember that not just military members went over there and served. Dave, you weren't in the military when you went over to Afghanistan. Is that correct?
Yeah. So I think it lends a unique perspective. All my time in Afghanistan was working as a private contractor under the State Department. I spent a greater part of more than 5 years there. And for most people, there's a rotation on leave, but that was 5 years in Afghanistan, and the bombs that went off at Abbey Gate, that was our AO. I mean, we ran that, we called it something different, our little gray codes and white, brevity codes for this and that. But that whole route in front of the airport, picking up dignitaries, bringing them back, transferring the local guard force back and forth, that was pretty much where we ran. It's interesting when you mention all this feeling of, was it worth it? And you have the commanding general that had to address it and say, you know, for all those that had served here, it was worth it. You know, I think where the anger comes from is preventable deaths. Everybody knows in war, in these kind of environments, in these area of operations, you're going to have deaths. And we all know that the majority of the military is 20 years old. You know, it's just, you know, for somebody like myself, who that's all we did was train and work for this scenario exactly. You know, what if the locals show up at the door and mass, you know, the Taliban comes back? You know, we knew how to, I mean, it's all planned out, and it's watching it go down. Literally nothing that you were trained to do was done. Nothing.
Right.
So what happened here? You know, and yes, I've been out of Afghanistan for a couple years. So when you see a pile of weapons, to the layman, oh, we just gave you know, the Taliban all these weapons. Well, we're trained to destroy one part of that weapon, get rid of the firing pins, you know, torch them up. So they may be 1,000 weapons there, but none of them will strike a primer.
Right.
You know, so what we're being shown and what was actually, you know, and I talked to guys that were on the ground, but they were pretty much swooped out of there quick.
Right.
You know, it's just a very sobering time to realize that, you know, all this time away from your family, loved ones hurt, maimed, killed, you know, divorces, you know, you name it, you keep going down the list of all these things that interrupt your life. But what was the major goal?
Right. This is something that I've seen, you know, on the wires, on social media and things like that. People are, of course, anybody who's served there, anybody who's served in the military, we all know that it's unsustainable to stay in conflict that long, right? This is 20 years we're talking. 20, it'll be 20 years essentially in October. As you know, we didn't immediately have boots on the ground, you know, the day of 9/11. So the operation started soon after 9/11, sometime in October. You know, anybody who served in the military knows, man, I mean, I've heard some of the biggest staunch advocates of conflict say we should have left there 10 years ago, should have left there 15 years ago. Of course, we all know that. I think it's how it ended.
There you go.
A lot of
it's not about, it's not about the time spent there or the 10 years, the 20 years, whatever it was.
Right.
It's about these past 4 weeks,
right.
past 3 weeks.
The challenge here is, for a lot of people who have worn the uniform, is how'd we leave? Who'd we leave behind? And so this is another conversation. I know that a lot of people don't know this, but the U.S. troops that were operating there always have help from the local indigenous population. There are a lot of people that believed in this mission over the course of 20 years. There are a lot of people that lived locally that will probably now face execution, persecution, their families. I know that there have already been reports of people being dragged out of their houses. This is interpreters. This is people who have offered services to the U.S. forces. That, you know, is that preventable? You know, it's a really hard thing to quantify. Could we take all those people back? I know the United States is bringing a lot of these people out of Afghanistan. The best and brightest among them who helped out the United States over the course of the last 20 years, they're being brought out. So there's some of them are being brought out. Some have been left behind. There are lists of people that were floating around out there that we probably talk about here, lists of people that said, you know, these lists were like, hey, we need these people out of Afghanistan, which may or may not have been a death sentence. But at any rate, the United States has been operating there for 20 years, and to leave abruptly, in some cases without having the supporting elements, you know, one of the big items of complaint right now, part of probably the reason why you see the VA crisis line lighting up, and, you know, among other things, we lost 13 men and women. And I've seen some arguments that say, hey, we've lost thousands of people over the course of the last 20 years. What's 13? Well, I'll tell you. Losing troops in conflict, losing troops when they can shoot back, in my opinion, this is just my opinion, is different than losing troops when they're maybe in a needless situation or a helpless situation, guarding a gate. I don't mean to take anything away from these men and women. Of course, they are heroes. Of course, they were there doing selflessly what they do. I think for a lot of people, the challenge here is, did they need to be there at that moment? Could we have avoided this whole situation?
Yeah, I think you're right on there, Matt. And you kind of brought it up, and I'll share my thoughts. Is if we had a list of names of individuals that we thought we wanted to see get their way out of Afghanistan, why didn't we just go get them? You know, I get you're trying to play the political game and make nice, with the Taliban as they reinstall themselves in the country. But as of right now, I think they know what the deal is. Like, if we decided to go back in tomorrow, I think it would be a matter of weeks and the Taliban would be removed from Afghanistan again. But we don't want to go down that road again necessarily right now. I don't think we would have met much resistance to small groups of individuals going in and grabbing those people. Those peoples that are, these names are on that list. I think sharing that list was possibly a mistake.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's been a bunch of mistakes made recently.
I think this is what we have to realize, though. Again, kind of taking a step back to look forward. The original goal of going into Afghanistan was because the Taliban harbored Al-Qaeda terrorists that allowed September 11th to happen, right?
Yes.
So what has changed? Now we believe them when they tell us, okay, we'll take back over the country and we won't go after you and we won't do these things anymore. Because it's funny, I read the other day that the Taliban has never been deemed a terrorist organization by the United States. They were known as a government in exile. So you have to ask this question, and it's just a debate, and I'm not going to put a tinfoil hat on here, but did we have our own purpose at this level, right? And the guys on the ground, the typical catchwords, fighting for freedom, fighting for your brothers next to you, this and that, but the higher ups, we're not even aware of their true ideals, their true mission,
Yeah.
I mean, you have to question it at this point. You got to go, what was the purpose of this?
Right. And I think to add to this, and this is, one big thing I'd like to throw into this whole conversation. This is not a partisan conversation.
Yeah.
Again, Tim and I always aim to be apolitical in this, because this is a discussion about the military and leadership. We went through 4 administrations in this conflict. 4 administrations.
Yeah. 2 from each side.
Right. 4 presidents have gone through this conflict. All of them have talked about a withdrawal strategy. All of them have talked about, hey, this is unsustainable. All of them have talked about why we're there, what we're doing there. To the point here, to the point of contention. A lot of the men and women who served there are. I saw a meme floating around on Facebook, actually, and it just makes me think about this. It's like, imagine going through 20 years of conflict just to give Afghanistan back to the Taliban. Or if you did that in your job, if you took 20 years to take Afghanistan away from the Taliban just to give it back to the Taliban, you failed. We failed. Politically, we've failed. And I don't mean that in a partisan manner. I mean, we've failed the men and women who have put on the uniform and gone to battle here, who flawlessly execute their operations all the time. Military operation, you rarely hear about military operations going awry or failing. It's typically because of bad intel. It's not because the men and the women on the ground are not doing their jobs. I mean, these are the best and brightest people we have in the United States throwing on these uniforms. I do this for a living. I talk about this all the time. They're more educated, diverse, driven, experienced than anybody else on the face of the earth. And I would love for somebody to challenge me on that. You're not going to find another great group of people, and then you're giving them weapons and the execution or the leash to go execute a mission. And they do it, but they can only do it as far as their leadership will allow them. And if the leadership comes back and says, well, listen, I've talked to countless Vietnam veterans, and I'm not going to compare the two conflicts other than this. You see the memes again floating around on social media, the Vietnam veteran comforting the Afghanistan veteran. Political conflict. It's political conflict. There's an element of keeping that military machine alive. It's $1 trillion industry. Can you just end it one day? Can you just stop it suddenly? There's other motivation here, but yeah, again, 4 administrations we've gone through.
Yeah, and
no, it's both sides, and the machine is too big. It feeds itself at this point.
Yeah.
I remember sitting on the embassy, and this is an example. You get a company, and these are companies that I know do this work, so I'm not implicating anything or whatnot. But BAE up armors vehicles. We get those vehicles. We have a contract for X amount of vehicles a year. We used to run around the embassy and looking at all these up armored vehicles that were collecting dust, going, look, there's $12 million sitting here. And they've got 50 miles, but the next shipment's coming in next year to replace all these vehicles that we haven't used yet. And it just keeps going and for what cause? And again, you've been doing it so long in Afghanistan that you forgot the main purpose of why you were there. Now the mission was, how do we get out of this, rather than did we accomplish the mission to begin with?
Right.
I think to try to keep it as apolitical as possible, I don't think that this couldn't have happened to any one of the 3 previous presidents as well. Had they decided it's time to pull out during their time. It just so happens that the individual that's currently at the top of the pyramid right now, this has happened under his watch. I'm not blaming him individually. I'm saying that overall, the people that make these sort of decisions, I think, did a lackluster job. I think there was poor planning involved. There could have been better, information and intel given. They could have probably listened to the individuals on the ground in country and gotten a better feel for what truly needed to happen. I'm not saying we couldn't have pulled out and had it go better or worse. I think that given more time and better planning, it probably would have been better, though.
Right.
Well, this seems to be a reoccurring thing that at least I keep noticing lately. Okay. You're trained a certain way because it works, right? We do this X because we know it defends against this, right? But why do we keep going back to taking away from what works, essentially? And I'm kind of getting off track here, but it's always, everything seems to be dumbed down a little bit, I'm going to try and catch my words here because I'm kind of got too many thoughts running in all at once. Basically, going back to this beast that's feeding itself, sort of thing. It could happen under any president. The one thing it's showing is there's a major disconnect from the people up here and everybody else, the regular citizens. Right. And I think it's not just veterans. I see a lot of people getting mad at it right now. Right. So what are we doing? What's our main goals here? What are our belief systems? What's the morals that we're standing upon?
Right.
We have to have this conviction to keep continuing on and love and devote yourself to that purpose. Right.
Dave, you brought up the disconnect between, the different levels. And I've seen on different social media platforms, people calling for, resignations, people calling for court martials of individuals based off the outcome of this withdrawal. And to my knowledge, as of right now, there's only been one person, removed of command. And it just so happens Matt went to high school with this individual, Lieutenant Colonel Stuart Scheller. He was demanding accountability from his superiors over what has happened in Afghanistan And I can't say, without a doubt that this is why he's been removed of his command and told, he's resigned. But timing just kind of works out, coincidence, if you will. But Matt, let's talk about this a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, hot topic. It hits home for me. Stu Scheller graduated high school, my same high school, a year after I did, and I can name on one hand the people that joined the Marine Corps from our respective graduating classes. There are just a small handful, and so of course, when you're connected with those people on social media, you keep an eye on them, right? Mm-hmm. So obviously, this was a little bit closer to me, but if you look at this story, it's on every major news channel. It's on military.com. It's everywhere it goes. And so I have a little bit of commentary around it because I've just been following it and keeping an eye on what this means. Here's the thing. Lieutenant Colonel Scheller, he knew that he was going to have an uphill battle. He knew that he'd be relieved of his command. He knew that it would probably lead to his resignation from the Marine Corps. No bones about it. The guy's not stupid, right? Couple of things have happened here, and you'll see this if you read the stories inside of LinkedIn, if you read the stories on Facebook. When he posts, thousands of people are engaging on it because everybody wants to know what's happening here. To the point that Dave made before, there is a disconnect. There's been a disconnect. This isn't a political statement. This is a disconnect from military leadership down. We saw over the course of the last 18 months between the COVID crisis, between the events that followed the George Floyd death, between all of these events, we have seen there are two camps. There's two parties of people, two groups of people. And I don't mean parties, not political, but there are two groups of people. There are people that distrusted the media and distrusted what they were hearing. And then people took to the streets because they distrusted their local governments. They're distrustful of everything that's happening. And the reason why you have distrust and disconnect is because they don't feel like they're being told the truth about things. Again, I use the George Floyd incident as a great catalyst for people taking to the streets and saying, like, we demand justice and we demand accountability. And this is happening in a microcosm right now. It's been happening in the military. Here's the thing. The military is not a democracy. Stu Scheller knows this too. He probably knows this better than anybody. He knew that what he was getting, what he was crossing into. Military is not a democracy, and there are rules. There are UCMJ rules, and there are policies. Just like any company has a policy about making political statements or doing whatever you do. Companies have policies. The government has policies. Military has policies. So he knows that. He knew that. It doesn't allow a whole lot of space, especially a senior officer, to take to social media and have the kind of conversation he's having. So I'm saying that as a statement of fact, right? A lot of people are telling him if he has gripes, he should have gone to the proper channels. But what happens? What happens if the proper channels are broken? What happens if there is not a proper channel? And we'll use a couple of instances here. We'll talk about those in a minute. But there have been a handful of people in senior leadership positions in the military over the past couple of years that have perhaps broken that chain to go have gripes and complaints. One was under the Trump administration, and another was recently an aircraft carrier commander around the COVID crisis. We can talk about that in a minute. The military, as I mentioned, is not a democracy. Over the course of the last 18 months, 2 years, we've seen distrust from all political sides in the United States. Everybody has kind of looked up and questioned what's happening. People are distrustful again of media. They're distrustful of leadership. I've also seen very visible politicians and public figures also take to media and take to the screens to go wave their fists and demand accountability and demand that people take to the streets. I mean, a couple of things on both political sides. Again, I have seen people do this. They go on the news and they say, if you don't like it, take to the streets, burn some things down, go do something. It's even being said that President Trump was the main instigator of the whole events in January at the Capitol. So again, all sides. What I think I'm saying here is, we're looking at Stu Scheller. I think Stu Scheller is an example of somebody who is willing to sacrifice everything that he's earned. 17 years as an infantry officer, right? He's been in and out of the conflict. Did he handle it the right way? depends on who's defining the right way. Stu
Mhm.
Scheller knew what he was doing. He knew what this would lead to. 100%
I
of
think
me
the
tells
future will tell. The future will tell if it's the right way, because
right.
I
Well-
can only speak for me, but I know in my little circles for a little while now, and I'm sure it's the same with you guys. You guys got a lot of veteran friends that are just they're hot, and they're just like, what do we need to do? Nobody wants to be the first man through the door, but everybody
Right.
wants to go
Right.
create a rally or something. And I'll be honest, Stu is sending shockwaves right now, because even in his little video that he did, he said, I'm calling on the guys that went beyond the wire and now are blue collar workers working out
Right.
here.
Right.
We need to stand together.
Right.
I think he is being very calculated. This is not a person that just put up a YouTube video and all of a sudden there's a repercussion. Like you said, this is an infantry battalion commander with 17 years in, and this is an educated, smart man that knows the
Right.
proper channels, which way to go.
Yep.
I think this is a start of a movement that we're going to see gain momentum, I believe.
I agree, and this is not, again, back to the apolitical piece. I don't think he's necessarily even going to the top and saying, "Hey, politicians, you need to fix yourselves." I think he's questioning.
It's not about elephants and donkeys,
right? It's military leadership. He is saying basically, if at least this is what I got from it. If you are in the armed forces to be a yes man, you're in the wrong profession. At least that's what I took away from it. And this goes for any leader in any business, military, etc. Again, I'm not encouraging anybody else in the military to go to social media and make a video. That's not at all what I'm saying. But I'm also saying at the same time, I think that anybody can agree with this, that if there is a problem, if there's a broken chain of command, there's a book, A Message to Garcia, that a lot of Marines read. If you've ever read this book, it's a quick read, A Message to Garcia. There's two main themes in that book. One, don't talk bad about your leadership. But then the other theme is who will take the initiative to carry on the mission. And it's kind of funny because I thought about that book when I saw what Stu Scheller was doing. And when I saw the conversations around this, that book is not by any means the Bible for the military. But it's an important read for people who serve in the military. If you've ever read the book, again, it's quick. It's a quick 15-minute read. But again, two main themes. One is don't talk smack about your leadership. And that's okay, fair enough, because that does bridge a divide. But if your intention is to bridge a divide, if your intention is to call out the problems instead of brushing under the rug, then he's done that, or he's doing that. Of course, we know that there will be an investigation around the events in Afghanistan. There's going to be an ongoing conversation here. Mm-hmm. And I think anybody who has served there, worn the uniform, anybody who serves a leadership position in the government should be concerned that perhaps there was a better way to do this. Perhaps somebody, to quote Stu Scheller, should have thrown their rank on the table and questioned, are we going about this the right way? But from an outsider perspective, we have to talk about it because it's like the biggest news in the military right now.
Yeah. At the end of the day, I think
this is what.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Tim.
I was going to say.
I was going to just mention. I was going to mention it, and this was evident within the State Department. You would have certain State Department officials that would have a negligent discharge, and we're like, "Oh, that guy's fired. He just lost his job." Nope. He's reassigned. Now he's in badging, but he's still in the State Department. And us contractors, I use the urinal, left a radio behind. Up, you're fired. You see it all the time. There's these different. And his resignation, he said, I have no confidence in my leadership. Or yes, there's going to be an investigation, but what comes out of investigations nowadays? Nothing. We know there's a level of corruption beyond all means, but nobody is held accountable for anything anymore. And that's why I said it's bigger.
Yeah. That's back to this whole, like I mentioned, the last 18 months in the United States has been everybody taking a side and saying, I'm distrustful of something that is impacting my life, whether it's my local, federal government, state government. I trust my governor. I don't trust my governor. But then I don't trust what the media is telling me. I don't trust this, that, and the other thing. I mean, look at Facebook. Facebook has rolled out automated bot systems to start censoring what is truth and what is not. If you write the word COVID or vaccine inside of your Facebook post, it starts posting fact-checking things. And the reason for that is because there has been so much discontent. I think we as a country, as a society, back to what you said before, Dave, we need to figure out what our culture is. I have heard this from other people around the world in my travels in the military or not, in criticism of the United States, that we don't have a culture. We're a melting pot of cultures. Whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, I think it's a good thing. We're a melting pot of cultures, but we do need to figure out who we are and what we want on the world stage. And this may or may not be an associated conversation around the events of Afghanistan again, but that's the biggest thing happening in the military news right now. Let's figure out who we are and what we want, and figure out what we demand of our leadership. And here's the thing, everybody, this is the United States of America. We elect our leadership, local, state, regional, federal, we elect them all. If you don't like it, and I hate to sound like, the typical tagline, if you don't like it, go educate yourself on what these people represent, demand accountability. And Stu Scheller, he took it, the way he wanted to do it, because I don't think he wanted to keep his mouth shut in March. And that's not always how we do it. There's a saying that, quiet people rarely make waves or something along those lines. If you look at all of the people that founded the United States did so on a revolution.
Wave makers.
Right. They did it because they were not satisfied with what was happening.
Yeah.
Again, I am not in any way insinuating, hey, everybody go out in the street and do anything. What I'm just saying is that if you don't like what's happening, if you don't like the lack of accountability, and to Dave's point, if there's an investigation and that investigation gets brushed under the rug, go demand accountability. Go out and start making some waves. Go run for a local office. Go be one of those people that is making the laws.
Matt, you brought up that America itself might not know, who we are or what we stand for right now, or, as a whole. I think someone like Lieutenant Colonel Scheller is someone that didn't have that problem. He understood what his ethics were, his principles,
right,
his morals were, and he saw things happening a certain way. And I think at the end of the day, if he would have just, stayed silent, finished out his career, spent the next, 5, 10, 15 years, whatever was left, and retired, he would have always had that thing in the back of his head saying, I left it on the table. I didn't do things the right way. And again, you're not a dummy if you're a lieutenant colonel. This is a very intelligent human being. He knew what was going to happen by him taking this action.
Right.
But in his mind, in his eyes, it was the right thing to do. I would tend to agree with him. We've seen other individuals do this. I will even say that an individual, not military, Snowden, he had access to information that he couldn't bear to continue to live with, the knowledge of this, this information that was being gathered without the public knowledge. And again, a very, very intelligent human being decided, I have to share this. I know I'm throwing everything I've worked for away, but it's the right thing to do.
But he had something to share, right?
Yes.
So in Stu's issue is he's looking for accountability. Now, he did say in his other video that I'm going to bring this whole thing down. I've only gotten started. So I'm kind of wondering myself, that he aware of certain policies or certain, we all know to become a flag officer, you're going to get confirmed by Congress. You're going to get nominated. You have to be political to get to be flag officer, right? You're going to have to do some politics. He's a lieutenant colonel. He's 2 steps away from there. Is he already privy to certain things, that intel that's been passed through him, that he knows, hey, we're not hitting this because we know that this is happening, or what's the bigger perspective that he has?
Even if there's no actionable intel, the fact that he's willing to stand up and say that the people above me, there's not a ton of individuals above him at this point. A lieutenant colonel's a very high ranking officer.
There's not.
So if he's willing to say that these individuals above me need to answer, need to stand up for what's been happening, I think that itself is intel. It's actionable items. We talked about the 2 senators last week that without first running it past the Biden administration, took it upon themselves to go visit Afghanistan on their own.
Mm-hmm.
I know nothing about these 2 politicians other than that story. I would say that's the type of action, though, that at least gets me interested in those individuals. And if one of those individuals was a local senator of mine, I would probably start doing some more research. What's this person about? Because they're at least looking for the answers. They may or may not find something on this trip. But if they're willing to take those risks and step out and say, hey, there's possibly something going on here, and I'm willing to take action, on my own to find out if there's something that can be done better, that's an individual I want in my political offices.
Right. Well, that's who you want in your business. That's who you want on your team at all times. This is not going to work.
They see something wrong and they do something about it.
Right. Let's go launch. I mean, let's take this. Let's take what happened in Afghanistan and use it in a business sense that anybody in a job can understand. If you're going to go roll out a product for $10 billion and you are the product manager and you're like, this product's going to fail horribly because we did no prior planning, we did no market research on this product, and we're going to go put it on the shelves. Hey, guess what, everybody? We're going to go put meat flavored or meat scented laundry detergent on the shelves. And you're like, this is going to fail horribly. You're going to raise the flag. You're going to say something.
Yeah.
Because you're going to
let's
save
get a
the
focus
company.
Group in here. We'll wash their clothes in this laundry detergent for a week and get feedback.
And I realize this is not, realize.
Well,
it's not
I think it's, I still think it's bigger beyond that, right?
Probably is.
Yes.
I mean, this is, we keep hearing these numbers. We left $80+ billion of equipment behind, right? Well, what does that mean to me and you? That means we just gave the Taliban equipment and my taxpayer dollars went to this or that. What does that mean to the people on top? I've already got paid for my drones. I don't care where they're at. Like that's the disconnect that I'm talking about. The American government gave Afghan money, right? We treated them like a teenager to keep their economy going. We held, I think it was $10 billion of their money. And every week we give them money to influx into their banks to keep their economy going. Well, now the Afghan government doesn't exist. So who gets that money? 1.3 of it was in gold. Now we're the executor of that money. So we just gained $10 billion, and I don't know exactly. I'm just saying like that's what the accountability that I see is on a much bigger level. Like,
right. And for 20 years. And
for 20 years,
right.
Working in the private sector over there, I got to see, I just can't even, it's unfathomable to me the amount of money that just gets pushed through the door. Like I mentioned with the up armored vehicles, it was the same thing for helicopters and fuel and body armor and food and housing and build. The amount of construction, the embassy is a little city right now, and they weren't even done with the construction. I know we had a hotel next to the embassy that was being under construction the entire time I was there. And for 10 years prior, it was under construction. It was never going to be built. It was originally a hotel for a company local, and then the Marriott bought it, and they bought it for like $40 million. And then somebody else turned it. It became high dollar value place because it's right next to the embassy. The embassy's becoming a city. We have this. Well, what it became for us is sitting in MRAPs in a construction site that was manned by the Ministry of Interior, and the Afghans have guns all around us, and we're pretty much pinned in there. For what reason? Well, this may be a threat where they could shoot into the embassy. What's our plan if that does happen? Are we going to no, you guys are just going to fall back, and it's like, what's going on here? Why do we keep spending money for what reason? Because it seems like there's a very few that get really rich off of it, and the rest of us are just trying to pick up the pieces and wonder what are we doing?
Right. Which is where this distrust, this disconnect comes from. This is happening. This is again a microcosm of what's happening across communities in the United States too. There's the accountability, and I even say this sometimes. Like I just feel like I see stories about things happening in government or in in the military or whatever, and there's an investigation never shows up on the news, and we're not even trying to hide the scandal anymore. We're not even trying to hide some of the reckless spending, et cetera, et cetera.
Oh, I bet if we said go right now, between the three of us, we can list out things for 10 minutes, on whether it's, and it's like you're trying to said before, Matt, it's not Republican, it's not Democrat, it's not political. It's both sides. It's all over the place. And so therefore you have a major distrust of everything. And honestly, what Stu is doing is the leader that, like, to me, it's almost like that's the kind of person we need. If this is going where you think it's going, there's a lot of attention, and this guy's just sacrificed a lot. Like, this may be much bigger than most people even realize at this moment. I mean, we're going to have to, you stated that we don't know who we are as America right now, but I think we do. The principles, the local people that I talk to, the people that I see every day, and they're traditional American people of different cultures, all different kinds of people, but they're all solidified by that American principle. Right. My question is the leadership on top, both in the military and in government in general, are they aligned with my principles?
Right.
Because
their
it doesn't seem
constituency.
like.
Right. It's their constituency. And that's, back to talk to your congressman, talk to your senator. My congressman's exceptionally easy to get in touch with. If I have there are hundreds of Congress people, and of course, so it becomes, that's where that accountability piece becomes kind of strange, where people are like, well, I feel like I'm not being heard. Well, that's how a republic works. I say we're a democracy earlier. We're a republic. We hire our politicians, we hire our leaders to make decisions for us. But the problem is, again, back to the theme here, when it becomes too disconnected from what the people are asking for in policy and practice and execution, we need to revisit the planning table and say, what are we trying to do here? And this is not just in the military either. Some of the loudest voices are making change in society, in companies, in work, in diversity, in like all of these topics that have bubbled up probably with the advent of social media, where people are able to share their stories, and now they have voices. And of course, I always joke around. I'm like, social media gives everybody a voice. Not everybody really knows how to use it. But what you are starting to see are people who are like, hey, I agree or disagree with this, or I'd like to challenge this. Let's have an open conversation. And those conversations aren't happening. Instead you get press conferences where it's a person talking at a group of media, which we know media is biased as well. No matter where you get it from, you're getting one side or the other. Right. And so I think the American people, again, I use this, like Stu Scheller is probably a microcosm. He's a cross section of what the American people are asking for right now. And it shouldn't be ignored, and it shouldn't be brushed under the rug, nor should any social movement or argument, nor should have, the people that took to the streets last summer who were upset about events happening in their communities. Certain sides were like, hey, be quiet and sit down. Well, no, you don't want to when you're upset. You don't want to when things are happening, when you need to make a statement. And so I think that's kind of what's happening, around this event as a catalyst. This isn't just one thing under one administration. This is 20 years of, if you go back to Vietnam, ask the Vietnam veterans, that era, this goes back 50, 60 years. This goes back a long time. It just needs to bubble up where people can be heard.
Yeah.
Well, but without getting political, you see in the recent past, there's certain people that have shown up to demonstrations in uniform, right? And they're active duty, and they're showing up to these things, and they get praised by the media, right? Which is essentially the exact same thing that Stu did, right? Under the guidelines of UCMJ, there's certain things you are not allowed to do in uniform, being represented. Stu originally made that video in his uniform. That was essentially like showing up to a demonstration and showing, that same sort of thing. But again, on his defense, accountability, the people in the past weren't relieved of command. They weren't, they might have been smacked on the wrist a little Article 15, something put there, but you're not relieved. You're not busted down. You're not nothing. Again, when I break this down and just kind of really think about it and take it line by line, this is, like you said, he is representing a lot of people right now. A lot of people are backing with him. I'll be honest. I'm backing essentially what he's done so far and what he wants to do and what he's put out there. I'm with him, because I've witnessed it myself in many different facets. And if this bus if somebody doesn't put the brakes on it, this thing's rolling downhill and it's going to continue to roll away from us, and we won't be able to put the brakes on it.
Of all the, I'll say, negative information out there right now with what's going on in Afghanistan, I think this is what I'm getting ready to bring up is a positive. It is a group of highly trained U.S. military veterans have secretly been rescuing hundreds of Allied operatives from Afghanistan. A group of U.S. veterans have gotten together and they had a week-long secret operation dubbed Pineapple Express. Plenty of information out there on this. It is made up of special ops, Green Berets, SEAL team commanders. It's they didn't necessarily take it upon themselves, but they, as a former Navy SEAL, Jason Redmond, told ABC, they were driven by a deep frustration and they wanted to do what they thought their government should have done in the first place and what we should do as Americans. This group was originally formed to rescue an ex-Afghan commando who was getting death threats from the Taliban for having worked with U.S. Special Forces and SEAL Team 6. Once they rescued this individual and his family members, they just started going around grabbing these names of these individuals that were high priority people we wanted to get back. So, I think that's a positive. We do have individuals out there that do care. I think this is a representation of, Matt, you kind of brought it up earlier. There's that leash. So you have these highly trained military members that go to these conflicts, and once they give us the leash to do what we need to do, the military does it extremely well, almost flawlessly. Sometimes that leash is a little shorter than it needs to be, and this could possibly be one of those cases. So if the traditional military can't do it, guess what? You still have these highly trained individuals who are no longer under the watchful eye of being currently in the U.S. military,
right,
that can still use those skills to do good.
And make no bones about it, this is something else that has been going on for years. They have been asking to get some of these interpreters and some of these helpers out of these countries for years. This isn't just hey, we're getting out of Afghanistan, let's go round up these people. They've been trying to get, Marcus Luttrell tried to get the guys that helped him. If you're familiar with the Lone Survivor movie, and that story, he was trying to get those guys out as well. You got to think about this. When you still have an occupying or an indigenous faction of people that are considered the enemy, and you are helping the U.S. forces, you're a target. You're automatically a target. And as soon as the U.S. forces leave or they're not within earshot, you're even bigger target. So again, 20 years, 4 administrations. This isn't a unique thing to what's happening right now. But I think that the abrupt nature of how we're seeing this withdraw, and I say abrupt because it was meeting a deadline. We were trying to meet a deadline. If we wanted to get everybody out 6 months ago, perhaps that's when it should have started. But I think that's again part of the thing that people are questioning in the military community right now.
Well, and you brought up the Operation Pineapple Express. That's another thing that is a mirror to what Stu. There's a group of veterans that said, "Here's the government's not doing it. I'm going to stand up and do this." Right? It's that sacrifice. It's that pushing forward. What I find coincidence, and this is where again we get to this distrust. Right? Where were they meeting to get those people through the airport? the Operation Pineapple Express was meeting outside of Abbey Gate. That's where they were operating, getting these people, and that's where the explosion occurred, right? Well, the Taliban has the outer security. We see it on videos. Basically, the Taliban stops people from getting here. The U.S. has got the walls of the airport. Nobody gets in through the wall. Taliban's out here. Well, on this day, there's no Taliban that were blown up there. And I know that area very well. It's a very choke point. There's basically two small roads that go to the Abbey Gate. One long one and one small feeder road off to the side. That goes out to Jalalabad Road and all that stuff. But I tell you what, is it coincidence that bomb happens to go off at that gate where there's veterans that are doing what the United States government couldn't do? You know, it's just the environment that we're living in now. You got to go. Now there's reports of you handing over to the Taliban, who was our original enemy that we went to Afghanistan in the first place, who now it seems to be all of a sudden they've become our friends and they're helping us out and they've got the outer security and they're going to allow people to come through and we made this deal with them and look at, they're just all of a sudden these great upstanding people that, you know, have honor and commit to their word and we believe them. And it just makes you shake your head like, what is going on? Like, there's something that is disconnected. I don't know the whole picture. Mm-hmm. And I don't think anybody does except for these people that are making these deals on the background, you know. Yeah. But you're not making a deal in my interest. I'll tell you that. You know, all the people that I serve with, all the time I spent over there, you know, you made a deal. And again, we're not getting political. There's 4 administrations on both different sides. That end result was this deal. Well, what does this deal mean? What is the deal? Mm-hmm. You know,
yeah. Absolutely. You know, I think in the next weeks, months, maybe even years, there's more to be learned about what's been going on these past few weeks, what kind of deals have been struck, things of that nature. Going forward, I would hope that anyone that is still over there in country finds themselves with the ability to come home safe. I hope that anyone that is been a friend to the U.S. military, to the U.S. government, that has helped us out on our journey over there over these past 20 years, if they wish to leave that country, they find a way to do that. I would say that if the Taliban is having to secure the airport, in my eyes, they're attempting to screen and keep certain individuals from leaving. And any government that is not allowing their citizens to move freely, I would say historically probably isn't a government to be trusted. I would reference the wall that was built in Germany. Mm-hmm. I would reference the Korea, but yeah, I think this has been a very interesting discussion today. I think that, over these next few weeks and months, as more information comes out, I think there's many more interesting discussions to be had. Again, to the 13 names we read at the beginning of the episode, you guys paid the ultimate sacrifice. You are truly heroes to the friends and family members of these individuals. Just know you've been blessed to know those individuals. And we thank you very much for sharing them with us. Very much. As always, you can find us on all major social media platforms. You can find us on all major podcast platforms. We would love it if you would share, rate, and review any of our episodes. Give them a listen. Share them with friends and family. Get the word out there. Dave, as always, it is a pleasure speaking with you. This has been, I can't say it's been fun, but it's been a good time talking to you again today, sir.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity. It's always good to get with you guys. And ending it, I'd like to go off of what Matt said. And there's a lot of people that don't have a mission right now, that their mission just ended. They're wondering if the majority of their adult life was purposeful and this and that. But I think the best thing that people could do at this moment is kind of turn to your local government remember the founding principles that we all unite us, and essentially I think that's the next battlefront, is to sustain our principles and our founding principles, and build upon that, and remember who we are.
Absolutely. Matt, anything else before we go?
Yeah, this episode's been a little bit different than some of our others. We founded this thing to discuss, military news and post-military careerism, which, obviously Dave, the first time he came around on the podcast, was talking about what he does in the philanthropic world and to support the veteran community and things like that. So it's a little bit different. But I think given the topics and the news, there's a little bit of waves being made among the military and veteran communities, and I think it would be remiss of us not to talk about it. And so that's kind of where we went today. Our intention is always to bring up these topics, and sometimes with humor, have a little bit of conversation with them. But I think that the events of the past week were not necessarily humorous in many cases. So we it's a little bit solemn today. I wish the best for those families who lost a loved one. I wish the best for all the families who have lost a loved one along this entire conflict. And I do encourage anybody who has served in uniform, who's feeling a little bit confused, lost, distraught, upset, full of anger, maybe missing a mission right now, to what Dave said. There are different resources out there. Reach out to us. I'm always happy to have a conversation with somebody, but I do think that the events of the past couple of weeks have kind of stirred up a little bit in the veteran community, and I do think we had to address those. We'll continue to address those. I do appreciate all the people who have left a comment today, who tuned in to watch the live broadcast. Of course, we're always looking for guests on this podcast in the future. Always looking for a really good conversation. Would love to hear from you about what you've got going on post-military. And Dave, of course, I do appreciate your friendship, your collaboration, your ongoing friendship. Thanks for joining us once again.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
All right. So everybody, once again, thank you for checking us out. And until next time, we'll be right back here